Welcome in to the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer, joined today by our friend Herb Howard of the Bigs, who is sitting in with David Haugh on vacation. Don't forget to like the podcast and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch each of our episodes on YouTube at the 670 The Score YouTube page. With that, let's talk football. Practice 11 of Bears training camp 2023 is in the books. Just a couple left before we transition into preseason game action mode at Soldier Field on Saturday against the Tennessee Titans. Herb, how's it going?
How's it going, Dan? I think we are officially in the dog days of summer with training camp right now. 11 practices in, still a bit of a mixed bag offensively and defensively when you factor in the injuries, but I think we learned a little bit more about this team than we did a few weeks ago.
No question about it. I think you're starting to hear that in the players' voices that they're eager to kind of do something different. So the arrival of that preseason game Saturday against the Titans will be welcome. Then obviously next week they'll come back here for a day, take a day off, and then head down to Indianapolis for those two crossover practices, which I think will be, for me anyway, really some telling days and nights actually, because they're going to be practicing at night down in Indy, but you expect the intensity to ratchet up down there, and to go against a different opponent and measure things up that way will be, I think, illuminating for us to see exactly where this team is on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think that'll tell us a lot about some of this defensive linemen on this front in terms of going up against some of the elite players that they have. You talk about Quentin Nelson and some of those other guys. I think that's going to be a really good test to just see how they hold up against another team and what that looks like. I think they also have the tape coming to the Tennessee game to kind of evaluate themselves from that as well, and then go out to Indy and put that on against those guys for a couple of days. So I think some really, really important days coming up for them over the next 10 days or so, where they can figure a lot out about themselves.
So we got a lot to get to in this episode. We have not had a podcast episode since the Bears completed the signing of Yannick Ngakoue last week. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the defense as a whole, which has had some really bright moments throughout camp and has also been dealing with a little bit of the injury bug. We'll get into the arrival of Marcedes Lewis, a veteran tight end who's come in on the offensive side of the ball to be a leader. And Herb, you're going to be a special guest contributor to one of our favorite segments on the show at the very end. What you talking about, man, is one of the better. Or what you doing, man? I'm sorry, I went different strokes there for a second. But what you doing, man? Courtesy of Zach Pickens. We'll let you chime in on that one in a little bit. But let's start before we get to all that. Light practice out here at House Hall on Tuesday. Red was the color code that we've been given, which is one of those low intensity, non-padded practices that we went through. But there's still some significant 11-on-11 work today, a little bit up and down for the first team offense. What were your overall impressions, both with the way the Bears finished practice in that end of game drill and how they managed through a backed up drill that we watched side by side from the bleachers on the east side of campus here today?
Yeah, I know that a lot of these, kind of ramp up practices can be a little bit hard they're not as entertaining as some of the other practices, but I do think that the team get a lot out of it in terms of install, in terms of the mental reps, understanding exactly what they're doing. And then they do a lot of things situationally. You talk about red zone, you talk about being back up 4-minute, 2-minute, all those types of things. And I thought they got some pretty good work done. When they got to that point where they take the ball from the 50, there was about 55 seconds left. They had the ball at the 50, tie game, and they were trying to get themselves in this position. Started off real bad. We heard Cole Kmet talk about that. He caught a nice ball over the middle, but he was so wide open, and it turned out because he ended up getting offensive pass interference. He had thrown the defender to the ground, and so they got them backed up a little bit, lose 10 yards there, and they end up getting a sack a couple of plays later. So they were behind the chains, and they kind of scrambled just to get themselves back within field goal range, ultimately setting Cairo up for a 50-yard field goal with just like 0.6 seconds left on the clock. I think when Justin was able to clock it. So not the best run situation there, but ultimately they did what they needed to do and pull it out. So I think that's kind of where they are right now. They're like not a real well-oiled machine, but functioning well enough to succeed if they shoot themselves in the foot too bad. So ideally, you like to see them be able to go down that ball in the end zone, or at least set up a chip shot field goal, not a 50-yarder. But ultimately, they got it done. And so I think that so far that's where they are right now. Until they can get just a little bit more high functioning, they're going to struggle through some of those things.
I think it's a pretty accurate description of where they are at this moment. You get that opportunity to kick the field goal, in part because Justin converts 3rd and 17 with a bullet over the middle to Tyler Scott in what might have been his best throw of
Nice.
the day. Just a really decisive
Yeah.
throw, into a tight window to a receiver who ran his route properly. And then you get the completion to DJ Moore, and then you got to scramble. You got to get up to that line of scrimmage because you mentioned it, 0.6 seconds were on the clock when they were finally able to clock it. If you're even another 5/10 of a second off, all of a sudden the clock's run out and everyone goes, well, you just blew that opportunity to win the game. And so it's these little details that they're ironing out. I was encouraged to hear Richard Hightower talk after practice about just how in sync the coaching staff is in those moments, because Matt Eberflus,
Yeah.
true to his reputation from the day he got here, is so well prepared and such a good communicator that he gets all facets. Hightower talked about being on the headset with Luke Getsy and Eberflus and Harry Freed, their director of research and analysis, and just working through these things even before the position begins to get themselves organized in a way that allows you to get a ball clocked with 0.6 seconds and send your kicker out there and potentially win a game. And then, you mentioned Kmet. He talked afterwards about, that's it. That's what the NFL comes down to. It's every little half second counts, every little detail counts. And then Cole kind of came back after that to say, well, yeah, obviously we're encouraged by practice, but we've got to do this stuff in a game because we all understand how many times last year we had the ball with the game on the line and weren't able to get it done. And so I think that this offense is eager to make this progress in practice so that they can then test it in the regular season and games.
There are so many things that can go wrong in that situation. There are so many moving parts, and you got to be prepared for it before it happens. And so the fact that Coach Eberflus is always over communicating, they're always getting prepared for these things. Everybody knows who's going. That's the part of it, right? Sometimes you get guys confused and you get one extra guy on the field. They can't afford a penalty right now. Sometimes you get up to the line of scrimmage, guys just kind of in that angst. They jump, they get a little false start. Now you got a 10-second run off. They didn't have another timeout there. So many things have to go right. And I like the way that Justin handled it. Got everybody up to the line of scrimmage. He was kind of peeking to make everybody was set, and then got that thing clocked. You kind of see the pride that he had as he kind of got that thing clocked and said, okay, we're giving our kicker a chance. And so I do like the way that they were able to salvage it, but you would like for them to not be salvaging that situation. You guys had 55 seconds. You had a timeout. You're at midfield. That should be an easier situation for you guys to make a couple of completions, get out of bounds, kill it, use your timeout, whatever you got to do, and set up an easier field goal opportunity for yourselves. But ultimately, like we said, they were able to save it because they are well prepared and they know exactly what to do. Coach Hightower even talked about how the players on the field exit and the players come into the field. So all those types of things really, really matter in those situations. They executed it well. If they can execute the first 3 plays before it, a bit better. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. Can you imagine how much we'd be ripping them in a regular season game if they,
No
they
doubt.
lose a game-winning opportunity like that?
No doubt. And you throw
Everybody
a completion
be
inbounds. You needed
Flus,
the yardage.
Fields, everybody.
Yeah. Oh man, it will be ugly. And that is a hurdle that the Bears have to clear this year. They have to get themselves ready to win in game on the line situations. And so I like the fact that they're practicing them a lot. They're able to correct some of their mistakes. Ideally, you get that 28-yard completion without the offensive pass interference penalty to Cole Kmet. Now all of a sudden you're just running the football and draining the clock and getting ready to kick that thing through the uprights. But that's just the way it goes here. And I think, consistent with most of Justin's camp here, this was practice number 11. You have some really, really nice moments. And then you have some moments where you go, man, like it's just not there yet. Justin's picked off an 11-on-11 work on a deep shot that he took to Darnell Mooney, and Tyreek Stevenson played it perfectly, read it perfectly, and then used his ball skills to intercept it. Maybe more worrisome to me than that turnover was one of those catch the snap and throw it quickly outside passes to Darnell Mooney in 11-on-11 work where Justin he just threw it too fast and too wide. And it was an incompletion on one of these things that should be an easy completion. And it's those quick catch and throw, simple situations that he's going to have to master to take the next step in his development as a quarterback. And when you see a couple of those things, you go, man, yeah, this is not the point where we should be escalating the conversations on, is Justin Fields going to be Jalen Hurts of 2022 and 2023? Let's try to get him to be functional in these basic situations so that he can kind of climb those stairs to eventually having that conversation.
Yeah, I know you were saying about a week ago that everybody's talking about the hype and, MVP caliber ready and all those types of things. And that may be true. It's like you said, it's about 8 away from where he is right now, where he finished last season for sure. And so I think that, you try to get some of these things, you talk about missing that catch and throw. That's basically just an extension of your run game, right? That's not even really something that's supposed to be complicated. That's just something to keep you ahead of chains. Mooney can easily pick up 6 or 7, or if he slips one, he could take it and make it a big play. But you got to get that ball out. You got to be on time. It's got to be accurate. That should be pitch and catch for those 2 guys at this point. So see them them missing those are things a little bit discouraging. It's still early, but those are things they want to be able to iron out, right? I know some people were talking about being frustrated about the lack of deep shots and what's going on there. I'm not worried about Justin's deep ball. I think he's shown enough that he can throw a pretty good deep ball, but can you stay ahead of the chains? Can you make the easy throws? Can you hook up on those slants, on those digs, on those outs? We've seen him do it sometimes throughout camp, but consistently be able to do those things that keep you ahead of the chains, that keep drives going, and ultimately put points on the board.
And ultimately, that's not a play that anybody's ever going to see on social media because no one's going to clip the incompletion on a swing pass to the left sideline. Just as they're not going to, we were joking up in the bleachers that the Tyreek Stevenson interception, we'll see the interception. The Chicago Bears will put that out on their social media page later Tuesday night, and it'll be like, great catch by the rookie.
You'll see the ball come
like
down and him pick it, right?
Yeah, you won't know who threw it, right? Like so these are the things that kind of balance out the judgment of Justin and where he's at. Let's switch sides of the ball now because I think there is a lot to talk about on the defensive side. And particularly now that they've checked that box with Yannick Ngakoue coming in on a one-year deal, a $10.5 million contract that Ryan Poles was very patient in executing. And now he gets himself an established pass rusher. In my opinion, this gives you a guy that gives you reliable production. It's not guesswork production. You don't say, if A, B, and C go right, well, maybe he could do this. You say, this guy has been in the league for 7 years. He's had at least 8 sacks every year. We understand how explosive he can be. We understand that he's got this kind of underrated power for the size of his frame. And now all of a sudden we get to plug that in. And for all the conversations we had from mid-March through early August, had the Bears been able to sign Yannick Ngakoue to a one-year, $10.5 million deal back in April, say, well, all of a sudden the angst would have come down. And so now all it is a matter of Yannick getting to understand what his responsibilities are here, getting himself up to speed. Look, we saw in 2018, Khalil Mack set out the entire offseason, wasn't practicing with anybody, showed up on Labor Day weekend, and next thing you knew, he was dominating a football game.
Destroyed the Packers.
6 days later, yeah, down in Lambeau. And so it'll be interesting to watch Ngakoue kind of assimilate into this defense, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on just what that does, I guess, for Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams, and being able to take a little bit of a deep breath and go, man, okay, we finally have someone that we know is proven.
Yeah, I mean, they've said all the right things about the guys having their room, but what are they going to do? They got to coach the guys that are there, but they wanted somebody, a proven pass rush. You had DeMarcus Walker coming over and putting the expectations on him. He had his career best season last year with 7, right? Now you got a guy who hasn't had less than 8 in 7 seasons. And so now anytime you're able to improve your room from the top down, that's what you want to do. And they were able to do that with their receiver room. They've done it with their edge rushers. They did it with their linebackers. Those are the types of things that you want to be able to do, improve these rooms from the top down, because then those players become multipliers and they help everybody else kind of be the best versions of themselves. It's one thing to say, okay, DeMarcus Walker is going to be our guy, but is he really going to be that? But if you got somebody opposite him that's commanding double teams on a regular basis, then maybe DeMarcus Walker can be that guy. You free him up. You free up Justin Jones and those guys on the inside. All those things kind of go together. And so bringing him in should be huge, but not only for the front four, right? It should be huge for the guys on the back end. Eddie Jackson talked about the ability to make those quarterbacks get the ball out just a little bit quicker, not sit back there and pat the ball. Those are the types of things that you want to be able to see. And so bringing him should be a huge upgrade for this roster on paper, also on the field.
Yeah, Matt Eberflus talks all the time about 4 as 1 and rushing the quarterback, where you've got a front 4 that can play off one another. And when one guy's got multiple offensive linemen or offensive players tending to him, well, it should free up a matchup for somebody else. And so just having that, to your point, now gives somebody potentially on the interior a one-on-one matchup that they can win, or an opportunity to have more space in there. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how that kind of puzzle comes together. Ngakoue has been knocked in some circles for not necessarily being a top tier run defender, but everyone here in this building seems to believe that's something that he's going to function very well at. Yannick himself said, you watch, this season, you'll see what I do. And then Alan Williams said, look, like that's something that's certainly in his skill set, and we're looking forward to bringing out of it. And Matt Eberflus says, yeah, he's going to be a 3-down defensive end for us. And so here you go. Here's your opportunity to show everybody what it's about. I do think it's interesting. Obviously, Ngakoue has been in the league for 7 years. The Bears will be his 6th team. He has his first run with the Jaguars, and then it's to Minnesota, it's to Baltimore, it's to Vegas, it's to Indy, and now it's to Chicago. And that's a circuitous route for a guy who has been consistently productive. And you don't get a lot of consistent answers on why he's had to change scenery so often. But we did get a chance last week to talk to Yannick and just asked him for his own kind of take on being consistently productive for as long as he's been productive. Here's what he had to say last week.
Faith, I'm a big believer in God, and the more you believe in Him, a lot of good things happen. And I feel like he's kept me healthy, and then also just being a part of some great defenses. We all had a common goal, and that was to get to the quarterback.
So you hear there, Herb, you got a guy that believes strongly in his faith and believes strongly in his work ethic. And that's one of the things that the Bears were able to check and had inside intel, both from Rod Marinelli, who is a mentor to Matt Eberflus, and from Travis Smith, who's the defensive line coach here. You've got a guy that has a reputation for busting his tail at practice. That's something they love to see. Certainly that will fit in with Matt's required, effort-based hits principle philosophy here. We'll see how Yannick assimilates quickly to that.
Yeah, I think having people who have that firsthand knowledge and being able to have that inside information on the type of player that he is, that answers those questions for you about, why he's been bouncing around. I think he's just had a set of unique circumstances that's kind of led him to be kind of bounced around that way. But you talk about, his production, you can't argue that. Now, they think he's a 3-down performer, and his statistics will bear that out in terms of he's played 70% of the defensive snaps over the course of his career. So it's not like he's not out there on rundowns. Now, whether or not he's been productive and effective, that's another conversation, but he's out there. He's going to be out there again. So hopefully he's able to set that edge. We heard Coach Allen Williams use the phrase, he can, chop a guy in the throat. And it's like, well, I guess I understand what that means, right? But
he said he's going to choke him out, right? Like he said he's going to choke him out.
Right. He can choke a guy out. And it's like, okay, so we'll see if he's able to hold that point on the edge and be a factor in the run game. Certainly they'll need him to do that, because you got to earn the right to rush the passer. So they got to be able to stop the run first. He's got to be a factor in that situation, but they got to have some versatile guys that should be able to help as well.
I'm hopeful next week we get an opportunity to perhaps talk to Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley, who was with Yannick a year ago. He was also with him in Las Vegas, and he was also with him when he started his career in Jacksonville. And so that's a guy that obviously has belief in him to coach him in 3 different stops and be able to bring something out of him. And so that would be really interesting. When you look at the defense as a whole, I think there have been some days out here through 11 practices where you feel the defense. And I love when that feeling gets going on the practice field. The most significant day clearly was a week ago Wednesday, when the defense dominated that day. Whether it was the second unit, the first unit, whatever it was, they were making plays, and then they were talking about the plays they were making, and then they were talking about how much they were talking about the plays that they were making. And so you got that edge that started to build, and it's just like, it's really fun to feel. And I know I've been a broken record here for 2 weeks talking about Jaquan Brisker and the passion he's brought to the table when he's been playing at a high level. You feel Eddie Jackson as a veteran setting that tone. I know the guys here believe strongly in DeMarcus Walker. He's been hurt for the last stretch here and hasn't been able to participate. But you've got now an opportunity to string together not only a defense that is playing collectively and playing with energy, but then you get that edge that we're talking about. And I'm curious what you felt over 11 practices so far.
Now you can definitely feel the energy. The energy that the defense brings, they bring that juice every single day. It's contagious. They make one play, they get excited about it. You even got their assistant coach Overstreet. He's leading the charge on that thing. Every time they make a play, he's sprinting 70 yards down the field to go celebrate with them. And so it's infectious for that defense. And what it does for them, I think, is it has a bit of a snowball effect. And so they make one good play, and then they start to believe they're going to make the next play. And all those guys are naturally like that. You talk about Eddie Jackson, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon settling into his role in the nickel. He's performing really, really well there. I think he's going to have a huge year, only solely focusing on that nickel position. So they're all flying around. They're making these plays. You got those 2 instinctive linebackers in the middle of the field, and that thing just kind of snowballs and it kind of takes its effect on the offense. And so I love the energy that they bring. They got to continue to bring that thing. They're going to need it on the field. I think this could be a very, very fun defense to watch. They still got to iron out some kinks. They got some injury concerns right now. You certainly want to get those guys back on the field so they can continue to develop that chemistry. But if they're all on the field and playing a lot of snaps together, I think they could be really good, and they could be a fun defense to watch because of the energy that they bring.
You use the word infectious. I agree with that. I would also say it's natural. It's not manufactured. It's just for these guys. It's very organic, and it's a vibe, and it gets going. And so Eddie Jackson on Friday had a lot to say about what he's feeling. And to Eddie's credit, he's self-aware enough to understand that there's been many years here inside the building at Hallis Hall where he's promised a new feel and a new look for a defense, and then he has to promise the same thing the next year. So he admitted that. I've said this before, but here's a whole bunch of Eddie Jackson just commenting on the positive feelings he has based on the way things are functioning right now during training camp.
Iron sharpen iron. We just on the defense side, there's a lot of guys that bring a lot of the juice. A lot of guys that's gonna talk, that's gonna get riled up. Offense, is we just trying to get that going for them. They got more silent assassins. They got guys that go out there and they do it with they play. But we just want to keep bringing that energy and juice to practice every day, just to get them fired up.
Eddie, for you to be part of a defense that has that juice again, I know that's like right up your alley. How do you feel about the way that is kind of building now?
I feel good, man. Like I don't want to sit up here and sound like a broken record, but like it's fired up out there right now, man. It's intense. Everyone's flying around. Like guys are locked in. Like it's a whole different, mindset compared to last year. Like you guys see it, if y'all out there watching, like it's like we on fire, man. Like we really flying around. Like we really getting it. No one's complaining. Everyone's locked in, buying into it. And everybody's trying to get better. Everyone's competing. No one's complaining. So when you got that, I feel like it's always headed in the right direction.
There was a play in 11 on 11. I think it was after. It was like a small little scuffle. But like you weren't even in like on the next series, but you were still jawing back at the guy. I mean, is that like something to show the younger defenders to like kind of juice them up too?
Yeah, everyone get juiced up. If you're a young guy, older guy, you can go out there, you can be fired up. You don't gotta hide it. Come out here, be who you are. And it's just, that chirping, I know it seems like it's something personal, but it's not personal. It's just to bring the competitiveness out of everyone. Like I said, we flying around. We high energy. We got a lot of high energy guys. Everyone's just feeding off each other right now and just want to keep elevating this thing into, week one.
So, Herb, I've got a reputation for two things. Number one, I love juice. So much so that a year ago when I was coaching 9-year-old baseball, I gave out juice stickers after every game to the guys that brought the juice. They were little helmet stickers that they put on with a little picture of juice on it. So I get made fun of here in the media room for being anytime anyone mentions juice, I sit up at attention and I'm into the juice. The other thing I have a reputation for is loving to talk to Eddie Jackson, because Eddie has a demeanor about him and a mannerism about him that to your word earlier, it's infectious, and you feel like, let's go, and you hear the genuine enthusiasm that he has in that soundbite, and you go, well, this is one of the leaders. This is one of the guys who has been here when it has been humming. 2018. Right. I get goosebumps right now. I got him on my arm thinking back to that Sunday night game against the Rams and the fact that those guys walked into the stadium that night without an offense and knew they were going to walk out of there with a victory because they had that same juice and playmaking ability and swagger. Now, listen, like this group currently, they need to be healthy. And they need, all these guys to play at full strength to even come close to matching what the talent level was of that 2018 defense. But you start to see it moving in the right direction. And damn, like that's a cool feeling to have. And particularly when you hear it from Eddie's voice, it comes across as very sincere.
It comes very sincere. You believe him. You feel his energy when he's talking that way. And you can only imagine what it's like to be in the huddle with him, in the locker room with him when he's talking that way, and how those other guys kind of take on his personality. And you can see it. It just all kind of swells over, and you see all of these guys performing that way. And he talked about defensively in terms of how they continue to pick out the offense. He said, we're going to continue at that Bear until that Bear fights back. We need them to have that kind of fire. And the previous week, I think it was Velus Jones kind of came across the middle and kind of short-armed the ball as he saw Jalen Johnson coming his way, and the entire defense seemingly on the sideline and were in his face. They calling him soft, all kind of stuff. The Velus gets mad and kind of fat, but that's how they are. That's how they are. And then the next week, you finally see the offense kind of fight back. Eddie Jackson gives Chase Claypool that shot on the sideline. Everybody's heard about it, and Chase Claypool throws all-stars, that scuffle there. But it created this physicality in practice where you saw the offense begin to push back. You saw Khalil Herbert drop shoulder on Jalen Johnson. You saw Roche guy keep going. Those are the types of things this offense is going to have to do. And I think good on this defense pushing them to respond that way, because they're going to need to play complementary football. Like you said, this defense isn't quite ready to say, oh, we've got the Khalil Max and the Akeem Hicks and all-pro Eddie Jackson. And, they're not quite there yet. And so they're going to need this offense to be a little bit more complementary. And so, getting them to think the same way is important, but you got to love that leadership project.
This is why I'm really excited for the Indy trip. And again, it's only 2 night practices in the middle of August, but I think it's going to give you an opportunity to see how they use this edge against an opponent and how the opponent pushes back and what that looks like. It has an opportunity to be high intensity, as I said, and we've seen these crossover practices get, you want them to be, as the coaches here will tell you, competitive but not combative. And so we'll see where that
Right.
goes because that'll be fun to watch. Injury wise, you start to scratch your head a little bit because here we are at practice 11 and Tremaine Edmonds is out. He's been out really for a week now with an undisclosed injury. You got Brisker and Gordon sitting out. You got DeMarcus Walker still out. Eddie Jackson was away for personal reasons today. But all of a sudden, you start to watch that defense play at half strength and you go, man, this just isn't as exciting. I want to see Tremaine out there. I want to see Jaquan out there. I want to see Kyler out there. And so it raises the concerns that we've had for a long time is this roster fortified enough to have enough quality depth where if you are playing without 2 or 3 of these guys at a time, you can still function at that high level? That's a question I can't answer yet. And it's one you certainly don't want to be trying to answer in early August. Hopefully the Bears are being conservative with all these different physical ailments. They won't give us a single detail on any of them. So we have no idea what any of these guys are dealing with to even play the guessing game on how quickly they'll be back. But man, you just don't want to be anywhere near week 1 on your schedule, wondering who might be available, who might not be, and what is the depth ultimately going to look like.
Yeah, Dan, you might not be able to answer that question, but I can. They do not want to have those guys on the field. They don't have that kind of depth, right? They've improved their front line talent. Some of the guys we talked about in terms of, improving their roster from the top down. They have better front line talent. This isn't a roster yet that can go 2, 3 deep at some of these positions. You talk about Eddie Jackson, Jaquan Brisker being out. Now you're getting into a safety situation that doesn't look really good. Some of the things that we see from Elijah Hicks. But then you have a DHC to come in there, a veteran guy that can be a pretty good stopgap for you, that knows his assignment, that can be a leader out there. You're in a bad position if some of these guys really start to go down. You talk about Tremaine, that's the difference maker that he is in the middle of that defense. Not having him out there changes the entire look of that defense. The ball in terms of what he's able to bring to that defense. So they need to be at full strength with all these guys kind of playing together, continuing to build that chemistry and that cohesiveness that he had going with TJ Edwards. That's important. They need these guys out on the field as much as possible. And I know that Flus is saying, hey, if it's a serious thing, we'll let you know. Well, define a serious thing because your captain in the middle of your defense has been out for a week. So define serious for me because I don't know that we see that the same way. Now, sure, it's August, it's early. They got time. I'm not super concerned, but at what point do you become super concerned? Because if this thing starts to creep, he's obviously most of those guys, obviously, in my opinion, are going to play Saturday against Tennessee. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be realistic. And so then you start to look at what they can do for you next week in Indy. And then soon after that, you're starting to look at Green Bay coming to town. And so how soon can you get these guys back on the field? And then they're going to go through their ramp-up periods, right, where they're getting a couple plays here, a couple plays there. They got to get back in pads. All these things got to happen. And so you start to look at the clock and say, all right, well, we need to start getting these guys back healthy and in pads if this defense is going to be truly ready to roll when the Packers pull up to Soldier Field on that.
Yeah, serious to me is if you get up in your coaches meetings and you say, hey, is Tremaine Edmonds 100% certain to be ready for the season opener against Green Bay? And if the answer is no, then it's serious, right? If there's any question at all on whether his availability for week 1 is certain or not, then you've got an issue that you've got to sort through. And we'll continue to keep tabs on that. And hopefully we do get to see this Bears defense play at full strength and do get to see them kind of build and generate the momentum that we just talked about, because it's got an opportunity to be one of those fun steps back toward the right direction that the Bears want to go in, particularly after a year ago where that 10-game losing streak to end the year was defined by a defense that couldn't stop anyone, didn't stop anybody, and won't stop anybody. But to your point again today, you're missing Brisker and Eddie Jackson on the back end, and now you're going with Elijah Hicks and Adrian Colbert running with the number 1 defense. You're not going to want to do that, multiple weeks during the season. So we'll see where it goes. All right, a couple last things before we get out of here. Mercedes Lewis joins the Bears. Unlike Yannick Ngakoue, he's been in the league for 17 years and been with 2 teams. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they were teammates in Jacksonville, and then the Green Bay Packers. And so he comes over, has a reputation as being a reliable mentor to Robert Tonyan, comes in with Ryan Poles talking about how much he can bring to this team as a leader and a veteran that can show the way to young players that want to do things. And then we'll see which direction it goes from there. But Mercedes came in and he was asked on Saturday, Herb, what was his motivation to keep playing into an 18th season, which isn't something a lot of guys do. Remember, Justin Fields, I think, was 7 years old on the night Marcedes Lewis was drafted to play in the National Football League. Here's what Marcedes had to say.
Man, I still love it. I still love the game, and it's one of those things where, if I were to stop playing this game, it would be mentally first, because physically, that's going to be there. It's when your mind just checks out, right, and your body normally just follows that. But mentally, I'm still at a place to where I still feel like I can help a team win ball games and ultimately try to win a championship. And so if I still have that feeling and, there's still opportunity out there for me to, showcase my talent, why not? And, part of it too is showing people that it can be done, just being able to have the singular focus, to go out there and be your personal best every single day. And for me, that's, this is part of my purpose. Like, I was born to do this. And I'm not going to disrespect the gift by still being able to do it and not being here. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity, looking forward to being able to add value to the building and do what I love to do.
That's an awesome end answer there. Just a guy who appreciates the gift he's been given, not just as a football player, but as a guy that can bring people along and doesn't take a day of it for granted. I loved hearing that because I think that's a great type of thing to put into your culture.
He was awesome to talk to. He was awesome to hear his perspective. He was just refreshing to talk to as a veteran player who doesn't walk into those conferences and think it's a much bigger deal than it is. We can have a natural conversation. You can ask me a question, give you a legitimate answer. And it was just refreshing to hear that from a veteran of his stature and just the way he went about addressing those things. So that was refreshing. But also, you hear Robert Tonyan say, hey, what'd you learn from Marcedes Lewis in your 5 years with him? Everything. I know, literally everything beyond how to tie my cleats, that dude taught me, right? And so, and then he walks in with that presence, and you're like, oh, I believe you. I believe he taught you everything that you know, because he seems like that kind of guy, and he understands, the privilege that it is to be in the league, and how blessed he is to still be able to do it, and how he takes care of his body. He referenced, how LeBron has taken care of his body over all those years, and so I think he's got the right perspective. He certainly has the skins on the wall, if you will, to be a good leader for this team. They've got two really good young tight ends on this roster already, and I think he's going to be a great mentor for them. But not just somebody come in here and just like, hey, be a mentor type of guy for you. He's going to be able to help these guys in the run game, his ability to run block, and he can still slip out and catch a ball for you down the goal line because you think he's coming to run block, and then you let him slip out the flat or something like that. So I think he's going to be able to pay some dividends for this team off the field, certainly, but also on the field.
He was one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite teammates of all time in Green Bay. And I asked Tonyan about that. Even before Marcedes Lewis signed here, we had a conversation off to the side about what Marcedes Lewis meant to the Packers and what he meant to Aaron. And Tonyan just said it looked like Aaron and Marcedes are old school guys. They're from a younger era, even though they're both still playing in the league. They're attached to that era that started in the mid 2000s. And they know what the grind was back then compared to how it was now. And I think there was a respect factor there that Aaron thought was super valuable to the younger Packer players to help show them the way, and it's good to have multiple guys in the building that can do that. So it'll be cool to kind of watch that unfold. Cole Kmet, I think, has been really cool in talking about how he's always appreciated that his rookie year came with Jimmy Graham at his side, and he was blessed to have a future Hall of Famer to help show him the way. Well, now he understands that not everybody comes into this league with that luxury. And Marcedes Lewis can come in, and it's not just the tight ends, it's other guys in that offensive room that can learn from the big dog. That's what Aaron Rodgers always called him, the big dog. And so it is now a rule on the Take the North podcast and at the Chicago Tribune that we will only refer to him as the big dog. So you subscribe to that rule and then get that locked in. All right. One last thing before we get out of here. I teased this at the start. We have a segment here on the Take the North podcast called What You Doin Man, in honor of that quote from Zach Pickens back in the spring. And
what you doing, man?
There it is. It's our opportunity to find somebody in our orbit, typically someone that may be a media member, and ask them what, Studs? We ask them,
what you doing, man?
So Herb, I thought this was appropriate to kind of give you the microphone for this one, because I'm searching through Twitter earlier this week and I see you in a conversation regarding your Chase Claypool meter, which you can explain here in a minute. And you're in a back and forth with Greg Braggs from CHGO, fan in the stands, Greg Braggs, who is a good dude and puts in a lot of work and is certainly not shy about sharing his Bears opinions. But you guys have a difference of opinion on the type of camp Chase Claypool is having. And where I thought this was appropriate is when you called him Mr. Mayor of Meatball Island, because I thought that was a good title for a community that we often acknowledge, but we hadn't named. So Mr. Mayor of Meatball Island is under the gun here, and you can take it away from here.
Yeah, I think Mr. Mayor of Meatball Island is lying to his constituents. That's really all it is to it. He's out here and he's saying, listen, Chase Claypool is dominating camp. He's out, and I was like, he's dominating camp? Like where? What camp? Like, he's not dominating camp. I have a Chase Claypool meter that I've been tracking ever since training camp started, and it's a simple evaluation of my belief that he's going to be a major contributor in this offense this year. And every day, and I think that Chase Claypool has been a very pleasant story throughout camp. I think he's having a pretty good camp. I think he's shown that he can potentially be a major contributor to this offense. They need him to be. That being said, he's not dominating anything. He's performing well. He's catching the balls that he should. He's a full participant, 11 straight practices. You got to love that as well. But dominating, you're just lying. You're just lying. It's this meatball stuff that y'all do. And because you know your meatball followers are going to eat it up because they want to believe that too. But it's just not true. Stop lying to these people just because you know that's what they want to hear. I like Braggs, but that's just not true.
So now it's your honor to say the phrase here, and then I'll give my thoughts on it. So give it to him.
Brad, what are you doing?
What you doing, man?
What are you doing?
What you doing, man? So I will tell you this, that the line for the buffet at Meatball Island never goes away. It's an endless line that streams around the block, and Meatball Island is always serving up the meatball takes. And I think it has become very difficult in the current environment to kind of separate some of the meatball takes from the realities that are happening on the field. And so one of the reasons I gravitated to that tweet is it's like, what is the definition of dominating camp? I'm with you. I think Chase Claypool has had an encouraging camp. I think for a guy who was on PUP 2 days before the veterans reported, the fact that he's been in all 11 practices and hasn't had a single day of a physical setback is a step in the right direction. I think the fact that he's using his physicality in 1-on-1s and 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 and showing you some of the things that he's capable of athletically, it's a step in the right direction. I think his growing rapport with Justin is notable and undeniable. It's a step in the right direction. But let's chill out with the dominating thing, because now you're setting up people for the idea that he's going to catch 75 balls and score 8 touchdowns and maybe have an 1,100-yard season, and that's just not reality. And I think I get this reputation a lot as being a wet blanket, quote unquote wet blanket, or a downer, when all I really want to do is just put an electric fence around reality so that we don't create this false outside belief that player X, Y, or Z is achieving to level A, B, and C, when it's not rooted in what we're actually watching with our own eyes. And so it's become much more difficult in this era where people that don't even show up to training camp every day are tweeting out reports from training camp. There's several accounts of people that it's like, here's what happened at training camp today based on the videos that I aggregated while I sat at my computer.
It's getting pretty bad. It's getting pretty bad. You're getting those reports. And it's like, it's fine, right? Two things can be true. He can be having an encouraging camp. It's solid. Like you said, he's using his physicality. I like the fire that he showed in having a fight with Eddie Jackson, the competitive edge. I like all of those things. That's fine. He's been here. That's really, really good. I started this camp at 51%. Right now, as we see here today, I'm 73% on my Chase Claypool meter in terms of my belief that he'll be a major contributor in this offense. But it started at 51% because it's been like, so people are like, they want 10% bumps in a day. It's like, no, he's get 2% bumps here. He's gotten a 3% bump here, but just consistently
no dips, right?
over the 11 days consistently over the 11 days. He's just had nice incremental growth, and that's what you want to see from him right now. Just being a full participant, running the routes. He's starting to develop that chemistry with Justin. So I've gone from 51%. I was really just at 50-50. I just wanted to lean more towards the positive than negative. So I started at 51% because obviously he came over here last year in a tough situation, didn't get much done, got hurt, really didn't get acclimated to the offense, didn't really ingratiate himself to his teammates or anything like that. Now he comes in this year, and so then he missed all the spring ball. He goes on pup right before camp, gets off of it. How could I be more than 51%? But then he comes on and he's been steadily improving. So you got to like the trend and the direction that he's heading. I definitely say arrow up, but dominating. What you doing, man? Knock it off.
My motto for the 2023 Bears would be what you just said. Nice incremental growth, right? Let's see that consistently, and then we can adjust our expectations as we go. We don't need to get crazy out of the gates. We can adjust it as we go. And I think they're moving in the right direction right now for a lot of the reasons we just talked about on this episode. Again, we've got 2 more practices before we go to Soldier Field for a preseason game. We're going to hear from Matt Eberflus on Wednesday and hopefully get a little clearer picture of how he plans to use his starters, at least the healthy ones, on Saturday against the Tennessee Titans. And then we'll go from there, and we'll keep moving through this preseason, keep moving through this month of August, and we'll get closer and closer to what is going to be a very anticipated showdown against the Green Bay Packers on September 10th. Anything else you got as we close it up today?
Incremental growth. Let's go, man. Incremental growth. Let's keep guys healthy. Let's get guys back out on the field. Continue to develop that chemistry. Continue to take those steps forward, offensively and defensively. I think, like you said, we can adjust the expectations as we go. But let's just keep everything in its proper perspective as they continue to improve this roster and this team and this performance on the field.
I'll make it clear. All love to Greg Braggs. As Eddie Jackson said earlier, I know the chippiness sounds personal.
No doubt.
It's not personal. We're just trying to have a fun, competitive experience out here. So that's all.
Shout out
that's
to you,
Herb
Mr.
Howard.
Mayor.
There you go. Mayor of Meatball Island. You can continue to run that land for as long as you need to. Herb Howard, great talking to you as always. I'm Dan Wiederer. Remember, again, to like and subscribe to our podcast. We'll have more episodes of Take the North as the week goes on. And again, game week here, preseason game number 1, Saturday, Soldier Field against the Tennessee Titans at noon. That's Herb Howard. I'm Dan Wiederer for our producer, Adam Stinzinski. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.